Okay, let's dive in. Think about something super common, something you probably just picked up at the grocery store, maybe even yesterday.
Like what?
A tomato.
Ah, yeah, tomatoes. Everywhere.
Exactly. They're in, like, everything, right? Sandwiches, salads, sauces.
Yeah.
Seems totally harmless.
Pretty much the definition of a staple food. But, as we've seen recently, even something that common, well, it can suddenly turn into a major health concern.
Right. It goes from being just, food
Yeah.
to something flagged as potentially risky.
It's a jarring switch.
And that's exactly the switch we're going deep on today. We're looking at this specific situation, pretty recent, involving tomatoes and a bacteria called Salmonella.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a small thing. Led to some pretty significant food recalls.
Definitely. So for this deep dive, all our info, it's coming straight from the official announcements. We're talking FDA releases, related news reports covering it.
Right, that's our source material. That's the factual basis for everything we're going to talk about today.
And our goal here, it's not just to, read you the headlines. We want to really unpack this stuff.
Don't need the details.
Yeah, understand exactly what went down, which specific tomatoes were involved, why did the FDA classify this as, high risk, and what were the actual steps people were told to take if they might have bought them.
Basically, cutting through the noise, getting you the solid info, fast and thorough, straight from what was publicly released.
Precisely. So let's just jump right in. To really get why these recalls were such a big deal, we need to understand the threat itself first. The bacteria.
Salmonella. Okay, so what did the sources actually say Salmonella is?
Well, fundamentally, it's a type of bacteria. That's the starting point in the info.
Okay, basic enough.
But here's the kicker, and this comes from one of the sources, citing the CDC. It's apparently one of the most common causes of fatal foodborne illness in the United States.
Wow, okay. Not just a stomach bug then. Fatal.
Yeah, fatal. That one word really changes the perspective, doesn't it? It explains why everyone jumps when Salmonella is even suspected.
Absolutely. Deadly potential. So what about symptoms? If it's not always fatal, what does it usually look like? The sources describe a range.
They do. It's actually quite a spectrum. Some people, interestingly, might get infected and show zero symptoms, nothing at all.
That's worrying, because they could spread it without even knowing they have it.
Exactly, that whole asymptomatic spread thing. But for lots of people, the symptoms are pretty clear and definitely not fun.
Like what? What's the typical list?
The sources mention diarrhea, and one specifically notes it might even be bloody diarrhea fever, stomach cramps or pain, nausea, sometimes vomiting, chills, headache. Kind of a miserable combo.
Yeah, sounds awful. Nobody wants that from, a tomato salad.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And, while a healthy person might just feel terrible for a few days and then get better, the sources are really clear. Some groups are way more vulnerable.
The high-risk groups. This is always important with foodborne illness. Who are they in this case, based on the reports?
So the CDC info mentioned points to kids under 5 years old and the elderly.
Okay, the very young and the older population. That's common.
But another source kind of broadens that. It includes people with weakened immune systems. Gives pregnant people as an example.
Right, so anyone whose immune system isn't working at full strength, maybe due to illness or treatments or pregnancy, like you said.
And the reason, it seems, is their bodies just can't fight off the bacteria as effectively. So the illness can hit harder, last longer.
Or, crucially, lead to complications.
Exactly. And the sources actually mention some pretty scary complications. They say it's rare, but Salmonella can sometimes get out of your gut and into your bloodstream.
Whoa, that sounds bad. What happens then?
Well, the sources list things like arterial infections, they call them infected aneurysms, endocarditis, which is an infection in the heart.
Heart valves, yeah.
And arthritis, even arthritis.
Man. So bloodstream invasion can lead to really systemic, dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
Heart infections, artery issues.
Yeah. And just seeing those possibilities listed, even as rare, it just hammers home why potential Salmonella contamination triggers that highest level FDA warning. It's not just about avoiding diarrhea, it's about preventing these, potentially catastrophic outcomes.
Makes total sense. The stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, so we get the severity.
Yeah.
But how does Salmonella, which, let's be honest, most of us probably associate with raw chicken or eggs, how does it end up on fresh tomatoes? Did the sources explain that pathway?
They did give some context on that. They list the usual suspects for Salmonella: raw meat, poultry, seafood, raw eggs, unpasteurized milk, or juice.
Right, the things we're usually told to be careful with.
And this is key for the situation, They also specifically mention fruits and vegetables.
Oh, wow.
If they come into contact with water that's contaminated with salmonella, this could happen out in the field, like during irrigation.
So the water used on the crops themselves.
Or it could happen later during processing, like the water used to wash or transport the produce in a packing facility.
Got it. So contaminated water is the bridge. It touches the tomato, bacteria transfers, and suddenly the tomato is carrying salmonella.
That's the likely pathway described. It shows how vulnerable fresh produce can be if water sources aren't clean or sanitation isn't perfect during handling.
And this isn't some, super rare fluke for salmonella to pop up in recalls, right? I think one of the sources had a statistic on that.
Yeah, it did. Pretty eye-opening, actually. Citing a group called PIRG, it said about 14% of all food recalls in the U.S. last year were because of possible salmonella.
14%? Wow, that's almost 1 in 7 recalls.
Exactly. It tells you salmonella is a persistent, widespread challenge for the food system, not just an occasional thing. It underlines why testing and quick recall responses are so critical.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It's clearly something regulators and the industry are constantly battling.
For sure. And these specific tomato recalls we're digging into, they're basically Exhibit A of that system detecting a potential issue and reacting.
Okay, that background on salmonella is super helpful. Let's pivot now to these specific recalls. How did they actually kick off? And what about that high-level FDA warning?
Right. So the information indicates these recalls didn't start because, someone found bad tomatoes at a grocery store. They were actually initiated by the companies that distributed or packed the tomatoes.
Which companies were those again?
Williams Farms Repack LLC and Ray Mascari Inc.
Okay. And why did they start the recalls?
Because they were notified by their supplier about a potential problem.
The supplier. And the sources identified the supplier.
Yes, and this is the crucial link connecting both recalls. The supplier was identified as H&C Farms. One source also mentioned the name Hanshaw and Kapling Farms.
H&C Farms, or Hanshaw and Kapling Farms. Got it. So H&C Farms told Williams Farms and Ray and Mascari, hey, there might be an issue with tomatoes we sent you.
Essentially, yes. The reports state H&C Farms notified them about potential salmonella contamination originating from the H&C facility. That notification is what triggered Williams Farms and Ray and Mascari to pull the product.
So the issue potentially started further up the chain, at the H&C Farms level.
That's what the source information strongly suggests. H&C recognized a potential issue with a specific lot, initiated their own recall for that lot, which Ray and Mascari received, and also notified Williams Farms. So the downstream companies reacted to information from their supplier.
That interconnectedness is really clear already. A problem at point A ripples down to points B and C?
Precisely. And it's around this time the FDA gets formally involved and assigns that risk level we mentioned.
A Class I designation.
Yeah,
let's talk about that. It sounds serious, and the sources emphasized it for both recalls. What does Class I actually mean?
It's the FDA's highest alert level for recalls. The sources define it very clearly. Class I means there's a reasonable probability that using the product will cause serious adverse health consequences or death.
Okay, serious adverse health consequences or death. That is incredibly stark language. It leaves absolutely no doubt about the potential danger.
None at all. It's the FDA signaling maximum urgency. If you see Class I, you need to pay immediate attention.
And both the Williams Farms recall and the Ray and Mascari recall got this Class I designation.
Yes, both of them. Which is significant, especially since the information links them back to that same potential source issue at H&C Farms.
Did the sources say when these designations happened?
They did. The Class I was assigned on May 13th for the Ray and Mascari recall, and then on May 28th for the Williams Farms one.
So a couple of weeks apart, but ultimately both reached that same critical warning level because of the salmonella risk traced back to their supplier.
That's the picture painted by the sources, yes. The risk assessment warranted that top-tier classification in both instances.
And there was another interesting point in the sources about timing, wasn't there? About illnesses.
Yes, very important. At the time the recalls were first announced, the reports specifically stated that no illnesses had been reported in connection with these particular tomatoes.
Okay, that's huge. It means the system worked proactively, right? The supplier, H&C, found a potential issue, notified their customers, Williams, Ray, and Mascari. Those companies initiated recalls, and the FDA classified the risk all before people started getting sick, potentially preventing an outbreak.
Exactly. It shows the value of upstream testing and quick communication down the supply chain, acting on potential risk, not just confirmed illness.
Okay, great. So we understand the salmonella threat, the H&C Farms connection, the serious Class I warning. Now let's really drill down into the specifics from the sources. People need to know exactly what to look for. Let's start with the Williams Farms Repack LLC recall.
All right, focusing on Williams Farms Repack LLC. The sources say the tomatoes involved in their recall were sold to wholesalers and distributors.
Wholesalers and distributors, so not directly to folks like you and me in a grocery store, but to other businesses first.
Correct. Business to business initially. These wholesalers might then sell to restaurants, schools, maybe other smaller stores, or distributors move them further along.
Got it. And where did these potentially affected tomatoes go? Which areas?
The sources specify 3 states for the Williams Farms recall: Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina.
Okay, Southeast focus. So businesses in GA, NC, SC receiving tomatoes need to pay close attention. Is there a time frame?
Yes, a very specific window mentioned in the sources. These tomatoes were sold between April 23rd and April 28th.
April 23rd to April 28th. Okay, that's tight. Crucial for checking delivery records. Now, what about the tomatoes themselves? What kind of packages?
This is where it gets a bit complex because the sources list quite a variety, 9 different types actually, reflects the wholesale market.
9 types. Okay, let's break those down carefully. What are the identifiers?
Okay, so first, there were products under the Williams Farms Repack label. These included 4x5 2-layer boxes, 60-count 2-layer boxes, and 3-count trays. All 3 of these under the Williams Farms Repack label shared the same lot code, R4467.
R4467. Okay, that code seems key. What else?
Then there were products that Williams Farms distributed but were labeled with the supplier's name, Agency Farms. These included 5x6 25-pound boxes, Agency Farms label, lot code R4467. 6x6 25-pound boxes, Agency Farms label. Now this one had 2 possible lot codes listed, R4467 or R467.
Okay, so for the 6x6 agency boxes, check for R4467 or R4467. Got it. Keep going.
A combo 25-pound package, lot code R4467. 4x4 2-layer packages, lot code R4670, then some bulk loose tomatoes, and finally XL 18-pound loose tomatoes, lot code R4467.
Wow, okay, that's a lot. Different sizes, layers, counts, loose, packaged, and crucially, 2 different labels to look for: Williams Farms Repack and Agency Farms. And the main things tying them together seem to be those lot codes, R4467 and sometimes R447.
Exactly. Those lot codes, R4467 and R447, are the critical identifiers mentioned repeatedly in the source details for this recall. You absolutely need to check the box or package for those specific codes.
And didn't one source mention the FDA even provided photos?
Yes, it did. Said the FDA shared photos of some of the labels in their original announcement. We can't show them, obviously, but it highlights how important that visual check and matching the specific label and lot code is. It's not just about guessing based on size.
Right. So bottom line for Williams Farms: businesses in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, check tomato deliveries from April 23-28. Look for Williams Farms or H&C Farms labels. Check the specific product types we listed. And most importantly, hunt for lot codes R4467 or R4470.
That's the core check described. And the sources also gave a contact number for questions specifically about this Williams Farms recall.
Oh yeah, what was that?
Jason Breland. The numbers listed were 843-866-7707 or 843-599-5154.
Okay, good to have that specific contact. All right, that covers Williams Farms. Now let's switch gears to the other recall linked back to H&C Farms, the one from Ray and Mascari Inc.
Okay. Ray and Mascari Inc. They're based in Indianapolis, Indiana. And this recall, according to the sources, was different because it involved tomatoes sold directly to consumers in retail stores.
Ah, so this one is more likely something people might have actually bought themselves. What was the specific product?
The sources are very precise here. It was 4-count vine-ripe tomatoes.
4 tomatoes in a pack.
Yeah.
Vine ripe. Okay. How were they packaged?
In clear plastic clamshell containers. The sources even give the weight, 20 ounces, which is 1 pound 4 ounces, or 567 grams.
Clamshell, 4-count, 20 ounces. Pretty specific. Was there a barcode number?
Yes. A UPC was provided in the source material 7-965-53-2000621.
7-965-53-2000621. Okay, that's super helpful for scanning or checking receipts. What did the label on the clamshell say?
It had vine-ripe tomatoes on it, and crucially, it also identified the packer. Packed by Ray and Mascari Inc., Indianapolis, IN 46204.
So you need to see vine-ripe tomatoes and the Ray and Mascari Inc. packing info right there on the clamshell label.
Correct. Those details together identify the specific recalled consumer package.
But wasn't there something else about the bigger box that came in?
Yes, the master case. That's the cardboard box that holds, I think it was 12 of these clamshells. for shipping to the store. The sources stressed that the really crucial identifier was on the label of this master case.
What was on the master case label?
Specific lot numbers. You need to look for either lot hashtag RM250-4250B or lot hash RM250-427-15250B.
Okay, RM250-424-15250B or RM250-427-15250B. So while the clamshell info helps the consumer, the definitive check, especially for the retailer, relies on finding one of those two lot numbers on the shipping case.
That appears to be the most precise way to confirm based on the source details, yes. Those master case lot numbers were highlighted as the key identifiers.
And where were these Ray and Mascari tomatoes sold? You said retail stores.
Yes, but specifically the sources state they were sold by Gordon Food Service stores.
Gordon Food Service. Okay, that narrows it down significantly. So if you shop there, this is relevant.
Yeah.
Which states had Gordon Food Service stores selling these?
The sources listed 11 states for this recall. Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, Mississippi, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Wisconsin.
11 states. Wow. Quite a footprint across the Midwest, parts of the Northeast, down into TN and MS, but specifically linked to Gordon Food Service stores.
Exactly. That level of detail, the specific retailer, the exact states, the UPC, the clamshell description, the master case lot numbers, it's all critical information pulled from the sources to help people pinpoint if they might have the affected product.
Absolutely essential for an effective recall.
Yep.
And like Williams Farms, was there a contact number given for Ray and Mascari questions?
Yes. The number provided in the sources for the Ray and Mascari recall is 1-317-637-0234.
Okay, 1-317-637-0234.
Did they give hours?
They did. Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Good detail. Okay, so we've laid out the salmonella risks, the Class I warning, the H&C Farms link, and the very specific details for both recalls Williams Farms wholesale and Jan CSE and Ray and Mascari retail clamshells via Gordon Food Service in 11 states. That brings us to the most critical question for listeners right now. What do the sources say you should actually do if you think you bought these tomatoes?
The advice is crystal clear and consistent across the information for both recalls. If you purchase tomatoes matching the descriptions of either the Williams Farms affected products or the Ray and Mascari recalled clamshells, the primary instruction is do not consume them.
Do not eat them. Got it. What should people do with them then?
Two options were given in the sources. Either throw the tomatoes away,
Okay, dispose of them safely.
or return them to the place where you purchased them, presumably for a refund or exchange.
Right. Throw away or return. Those are the actions advised in the official announcements to get this potentially contaminated product out of your kitchen and out of circulation.
Absolutely. So if you're in one of those affected states, especially if you shop at Gordon Food Service, or if you're a business that received wholesale tomatoes in the Southeast from Williams Farms during late April, really take a minute. Check any tomatoes you might still have.
Look for those company names, the packaging types, the labels, Williams Farms or H&C Farms, the specific UPC for the Ray and Mascari clamshells, and especially those lot codes we mentioned. R467 or R4470 for Williams Farms, and RM250-424-15250B, or RM250-427-15250B on the master case for Ray and Mascari.
And if you find a match, the directive from the sources is unambiguous. Get rid of them or take them back. Don't risk it.
And if people have questions, or worse, if they think they ate some and feel sick.
That's where those contact numbers come back in. The sources provided them for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
For Williams Farms, again, Jason Brellan at 843-866-7707 or 843-599-5154.
And for Ray and Mascari.
1-317-637-0234, Monday to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. Those are the official channels provided by the companies for inquiries or reports.
Okay, now shifting slightly, didn't one of the sources also include some general tips about preventing salmonella? Things beyond just these specific tomatoes.
Yes, it did. And they're worth mentioning because they tie back to the bigger picture of food safety this whole situation highlights.
Like what kind of tips?
Well, for instance, washing and sanitizing surfaces. If you did have these recalled tomatoes in your kitchen, on a cutting board, a counter, in a fridge drawer, the advice is to thoroughly clean and sanitize those areas afterwards.
Makes sense. Prevent cross-contamination, right?
Yeah.
Stop any potential bacteria from spreading to other foods.
Exactly. And linked to that, of course, is hand washing. The source emphasized washing hands really well with soap and warm water after you touch potentially contaminated food or after you clean those surfaces.
Basic hygiene, but so important. Still the first line of defense.
Absolutely fundamental. The source also mentioned avoiding certain high-risk foods, especially if you're immunocompromised. It gave sprouts as an example.
Right, we talked about high-risk groups earlier. So this is about being extra cautious with foods known to sometimes carry risk if you fall into one of those vulnerable categories. Even though this recall was tomatoes, the advice applies more broadly.
Correct. It's general vigilance. And one last tip mentioned was about pet food.
Pet food, how does that connect?
Salmonella can sometimes be found in pet food too. So the advice was basically to handle pet food carefully, wash hands after touching it, and keep it separate from human food prep areas to avoid any accidental cross-contamination in the kitchen.
Okay. Another potential source of contamination to be aware of. So these general tips included in the source material alongside the recall details kind of reinforce that this tomato incident is a reminder about overall food safety practices.
Exactly. They're practical steps based on the info provided that everyone can use to reduce risks, not just from this specific recall, but generally.
It emphasizes that while there are systems in place, our own actions in the kitchen matter a lot too.
A crucial layer of protection.
Okay, let's start to wrap up this deep dive. We've gone through the information from the FDA announcements and news reports pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, we looked at Salmonella itself, what it is, the symptoms, the serious risks, especially for vulnerable people, and those rare but dangerous complications mentioned in the sources.
We traced how these two recalls, Williams Farms and Ray and Mascari, were connected back to notifications from their supplier, H&C Farms, based on the reports.
We definitely hit hard on that Class I FDA warning, understanding that it signals the highest level of risk potential for serious adverse health consequences or death. Can't overstate that.
And we spent a lot of time on the nitty-gritty details from the sources. The specific products, package types, labels, weights, the UPC, and especially those critical lot codes for both recalls, plus the states and stores involved.
And of course, the bottom line advice from the sources. Check your tomatoes, and if they match the recall descriptions, do not eat them, throw them out, or return them. Use the contacts if needed.
So what's the bigger picture here? So what's beyond just these tomatoes? I think these recalls, as laid out in our source material, really show the food safety system in action, warts and all maybe.
Yeah, you see how an issue detected somewhere in the supply chain, potentially at the H&C Farms facility, leading them to notify their customers, triggers responses down the line from companies like Williams Farms and Ray and Mascari, and brings in the regulatory oversight with the FDA's high-risk classification. It's a chain reaction.
And it really underscores how vital it is for us, for you listening, to stay plugged into this specific information when it comes out. Getting those details straight from the official sources, like the FDA, is key for your own safety.
Knowing the exact product, the brand, the lot code, that's what lets you actually identify and avoid the risk. It's not abstract, it's actionable intelligence.
So we really encourage you, take these details we pulled from the report seriously. If you're in those states, if you shop at Gordon Food Service, if you're in the wholesale chain in the Southeast, double check. That Class I warning means business. It signifies a real potential danger that needs action.
You're basically the final checkpoint in the food safety chain. Being informed and vigilant is your role.
Which leads to maybe one final thought to chew on, based on how this all unfolded according to the sources. You have these two separate recalls, different companies, different products, different states. But they both trace back to that single supplier, H&C Farms.
Right. It really paints a picture of the modern food supply chain, doesn't it? It's incredibly complex, incredibly interconnected.
Super efficient at getting food like tomatoes from A to B, distributed under different brands across huge distances.
But that same interconnectedness, as this situation clearly shows, means a problem at one single point, like a potential contamination issue at H&C Farms, identified in the reports, can spread its impact far and wide. Multiple states, multiple companies, various products, all affected before anyone even buys it.
So it makes you wonder, right, what does this complexity mean for guaranteeing food safety across the board?
Yeah.
How do you manage risk in such a vast network?
And it really highlights how critical vigilance is at every single step. From the farm, to the processing plant like H&C, to the distributors like Williams and Ray and Mascari, to the retailer like Gordon Food Service.
And right down to us, in our own kitchens, paying attention to recalls and handling food safely. It's a shared responsibility, amplified by the very nature of the system that brings us our food.
It definitely gives you a new appreciation for the journey that tomato took, and the importance of every link in that chain staying strong. Food for thought, for sure.